Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This video is about the development of the tongue, and because the nerve supply is very much related to the development, I'm going to also talk about the nerve supply of the tongue. And also towards the end of it, we're going to discuss the first aid mention as usual. So let's get into it. So I'm going to give you some perspective कि क्या क्या हुआ है until we get to the point of development of the tongue. So you have your zygote, your morula, blastocyst, bilaminar germ disc, trilaminar germ disc, extraembryonic changes, placenta formation, intraembryonic, all that has happened. Intraembryonic changes, folding of the embryo has happened, and eventually the yolk sac is like this. So this is your endodermal gut tube, which has a foregut, a midgut, and a hindgut, right? So the foregut undergoes endodermal thickenings. These endodermal thickenings form the pharyngeal arches. So there's 6 on each side. So they grow ventrally to meet in the middle, and that's how they form this area, which is the floor of the mouth, you could say. Here you'll see various changes, swellings, etc. eventually will contribute to the development of various adult structures. For example, by discussing tongue, or it could be epiglottis, thyroid gland, etc. etc. So talking about tongue, which swellings take part in this? So we have, first of all, two lingual swellings which appear in the first arch. These two swellings are separated by one singular swelling, tubercular membrane, which also comes in the first arch. So this already discussed three swellings in the first arch. Now what is the foramen cecum? Quickly gonna tell you just in case you don't know. So for better understanding, imagine this is a plane, okay, and you have, this is the triangular pharyngeal arch, right? So I'm making that here, right? From here basically a diverticulum emerges, okay, which comes like that. It's coming downwards. This is called as the thyroglossal duct, which is a diverticulum, and this eventually forms the thyroid gland. So when this diverticula is coming from here, which is just caudal to the tuberculum impar, there is a foramen that is formed there called as the foramen cecum, and this foramen cecum is also there in the adult tongue. It's there even now. So yeah, that's about the first arch things. Then nothing to discuss about in the second arch. Then we have the hypobranchial eminence, also called as the copula of His. So these are all the swellings that form the tongue. So gonna go in a little more detail here. We have the two lingual swellings, tuberculum, foramen cecum. Hypobranchial eminence, also called as the copula of His, is divided into two parts. The cranial part called as the copula, and the caudal part. The cranial part, it contributes to the development of the tongue. It's also called as the copula. The caudal part then forms the epiglottis. Alright. So all of this together forms your tongue. Basically the two lingual swellings, they grow medially and they grow basically posteriorly to form your anterior 2/3 of the tongue along with the tuberculum impar, and here you can see the cranial part of the hypobronchial eminence forms the tongue, and here this will form the epiglottis. Now where did the second arch go? The hypobranchial eminence was arising in the third arch. Where did the second arch go? So during the development of the tongue, first the arches are like this, then the third arch overgrows the second arch, and the second arch does not take part in the development of the tongue anymore. So you have your first arch, and the third arch, and the fourth arch. Alright. So here also you will see anterior 2/3 is by the first arch, then you see the posterior 1/3 by the third arch, and then eventually towards the end the fourth arch, and you can see the epiglottis. So as we discussed, behind the tuberculum impar wala swelling there is the foramen cecum, and this line which is dividing the anterior 2/3 and the posterior 1/3 is the sulcus terminalis, which is also there in the adult tongue. So that's all for the development. There is pharyngeal arches, there's a floor, there are swellings, the swellings grow, fuse, and you have your adult tongue. So now we'll go into the nerve supply. So before we go into that, I'd like to just quickly give you an overview for better understanding. So you have your tongue, right? So the tongue will have your mucosa or the epithelial lining, and in like it will have its muscles. All right. This mucosa includes the epithelium, the taste buds, the papillae, all of that, and these muscles are all the intrinsic muscles, right? So both of them have their own supply. Mucosa is developing from what? Our pharyngeal arches. Whatever we just discussed, the anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3, everything, that is the mucosa of the tongue. So that's why the mucosa of the tongue is supplied by the nerves of the pharyngeal arches. Like whatever nerve is of the pharyngeal arches will supply the mucosa of the tongue. But the muscles, they are developing from occipital myotomes. Myotomes are also there, the different myotomes. Out of them, the occipital myotomes are helping in the development or forming the muscles of the tongue. So they won't have the nerve supply of the pharyngeal arches, they'll have a separate nerve supply. So to name, they are supplied by the hypoglossal nerve or the 12th cranial nerve. There is one exception though of this nerve supply. I'm going to make a quick short video about the muscles of the tongue and their actions and nerve supply, etc. So I'm not going to talk about much in this video. The mucosa, on the other hand, is supplied by the pharyngeal arches, okay, nerve supply. For example, the first arch ka nerve is mandibular nerve. So the tongue also has a nerve supply, mandibular nerve, and etc. 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 like that. One more thing I'd like to say, in the nerve supply, again you'll have two types. In the sense, you'll have your general sensation and you'll have your special sensation. General sensation means, like for example, if you touch your tongue, you can feel it. If you eat a hot food, you can feel it. You can feel pain. So all of this, touch, pain, pressure, temperature, all of these are general sensations. Special sensations are the ones which only the tongue can do, which is your taste sensation. So we'll see how the both of them are, the sensations have been taken by what nerves. Okay, so coming back here, so as I said, the nerve supply of the mucosa of the tongue is same as the nerve supply of the pharyngeal arches. So the anterior 2/3 comes from the first arch. So what is the nerve supply of the first arch? It is the mandibular nerve, right? More specifically, the lingual branch of the mandibular nerve supplies the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, and it takes the general sensations like pain, touch, temperature, etc. What about the special or the taste sensation of the first arch? That is carried by the chorda tympani. A way to understand this, if you remember, the nerve supply for the second arch is the facial nerve, right? Because the muscles of the facial expressions are in the second arch, and that's why facial nerve is the nerve of the second arch. Why is chorda tympani, which is the branch of facial nerve, supplying something of the first arch? So I'm going to explain you that quickly. So imagine this is the first arch, second arch, third arch, so on. We're going to take another color for the nerve. So you have your mandibular nerve or its lingual branch coming like this, supplying the first arch. Alright, second arch. What happens is a branch comes out of the facial nerve and it goes and it supplies the first arch. Which branch is this? This is the chorda tympani, obviously. So what one more thing that you can take from this is the nerve which supplies the caudal region of the arch. This is the caudal region, this is the cranial region. The caudal region of the arch is called as a post-traumatic nerve, and pre-traumatic nerve, and the one that supplies the cranial part is called as the post-traumatic nerve. So you could say that mandibular nerve is the post-traumatic nerve of the first arch, whereas the chorda tympani is the pre-traumatic nerve of the first arch. Mandibular nerve carries the general sensations, caudal tympani carries the special sensations. So I just wanted to make it clear. Sorry if it took too long. So anterior 2/3 done. Now it's easier from now. Posterior 1/3, both the general sensation and the special sensations are carried only by one nerve, which is the nerve of the third arch, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve. So glossopharyngeal nerve. Whereas the posterior most part of the tongue has one nerve for both general and special senses, which is the vagus nerve. Alright, so because to explain this, glossopharyngeal nerve is the nerve of the third arch, so that is why glossopharyngeal nerve is there, and vagus nerve is the nerve of the fourth arch, so that's why it is there. In some books you can see the word superior laryngeal nerve as the nerve of the fourth arch, but that in itself is the branch of the vagus nerve, so anything could do. Either you say superior laryngeal nerve or you say vagus. Either of them are correct for the nerve supply of the posterior most part of the tongue or the extreme posterior part of the tongue. So that's all for the nerve supply. Now quickly gonna go through what is given in the first aid. So here we have tongue development. First, pharyngeal arch forms the anterior 2/3. Sensation via mandibular nerve. C and 5 means trigeminal, 3 means the third branch, which is the mandibular nerve, and the taste sensations via the cauda tympani of the facial nerve, which is cranial 7. Third and fourth pharyngeal arches forms the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Sensation and taste both mainly via glossopharyngeal nerve, 9th cranial nerve, the extreme posterior via the vagus nerve or the 10th cranial nerve. So you can see it here again. Taste is by your facial, glossopharyngeal and vagus, right? Pain comes where? In general sensation, that is all by the mandibular, glossopharyngeal, vagus. And motor, one is we have hypoglossal, and only one muscle, which is the palatoglossus, is supplied by the vagus nerve. We're going to discuss about it in the next video. So now we're going to talk about the motor innervation much. Just that cranial nerve 12 supplies most of the tongue muscles, intrinsic and extrinsic, but one palatoglossus is supplied by the vagus nerve. So yep. Now normally I make a separate video for the anomalies and the development, but the first aid hasn't mentioned any anomalies in the tongue development, so I'm not gonna make a separate video and quickly just mention it here. The anomalies could be macroglossia, that means you have the tongue develops to be giant or very big. Microglossia, it's very small. Or aglossia, it is completely absent. Or the last is ankylosglossia. What is ankylosglossia? Is the apical part of the tongue may be anchored to the floor of the mouth by an overdeveloped frenulum. So laterally, if we see, if this is the tongue, the frenulum is supposed to be here, but if it's developed more, it will be very widespread. So the apical part of the tongue will be anchored to the floor, and that is called as ankylosglossia or tongue tie, and you obviously can't speak properly. So that is ankylosglossia. Instead of the floor of the tongue is adherent to the palate, it will called as ankylosglossia superior. So that's all for this video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.